everybody. Reporting to you again from the Glamour City, Hollywood.
What we need is much more mass adoption of this and companies like us to take these new technologies and bring them to market so that we can commercialize some of these sort of much newer, more cutting edge, really, really interesting alternatives to plastic.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for our show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Lauren Gropper, founder and CEO of Repurpose. Welcome to the show today.
Thanks, Scott. It's great to be here.
Your background is in sustainable design, and you worked in Hollywood on film and TV sets, to name a few, where you helped design and build sets. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was always very passionate about sustainability as a kid and wanted a career in sustainability, but back then there wasn't really a clear career path. And I also had a huge interest in design. So I started out actually in the green building space, working on buildings, mostly in New York, but commercial buildings, airports, hotels, making them sustainable. So building them not conventionally, but with more sustainable materials, energy systems, so that they had a much lesser impact on the environment. And then that led me to an opportunity in Hollywood to take those skills and bring that to set design, because I think a lot of people don't realize, and it's a lot better now, but back then, sets are made, then they're used temporarily, and then they go to landfill, and everything that's used on set during that time is destroyed. So we were trying to design more for reusability, circularity, and that's when I got quite interested in this waste reduction issue. Mm-hmm. So it became very interesting to me to see why, how can we reduce the waste on sets? We need something that is disposable and temporary, but could we use something perhaps that doesn't last forever, like plastic? Why are we using something that's designed using petroleum that we use for 5 minutes and then throw away? It seemed like someone like myself who had studied sustainable design just did not make sense from a design standpoint. We should be thinking about circularity. How is the product made? What is it made from? How is it disposed of? Can we design something so that there's no waste? And that was what really got me excited about this whole area of design for circularity. And that's really how Repurpose was born.
So when you were working on architecture and design, I think you're referring to LEED standards like silver, gold, platinum, for instance, prior to all the current lingo that we use around climate action and sustainability. And a lot of those have been in place for some time. And of course, building and new building, but also renovation is a huge area of opportunities, which I think some of those opportunities still remain. But to your point around sets, which is quite interesting, is even just like the food service, so much of that is all disposable. So if you've ever participated in, I'm talking about those that are listening, TV sets or movie sets, lots of disposable foods, right? Or utensils, I should say, and cutlery. That's a real issue. And so to your point, it's not just a set design, but it's just everyday use. We don't even think about it. It's so prevalent, isn't it?
Absolutely, because the nature of a set is that it's temporary. If you're on location, for example, you don't have, the ability to reuse or what have you, and you have to use it quickly, move on. Time is limited on sets, and so you need something quick. But certainly, I think the community in Hollywood was very interested in kind of lessening their footprint and what could they actually do, what was available. And at the time that I was doing this, there really wasn't very much available, if anything at all. And what was available cost significantly more. So it was very difficult to make that change back then because you had to pay so much more to use something more sustainable. And it actually didn't work as well back then. So you would be making a sacrifice on quality. You would be using a spoon that would melt in your soup, or, a plate that would leak and break. I mean, it was unfortunate, but it was interesting that if that technology could improve, and if the quality could improve and the price could come down, there was absolutely zero reason not to use it, which is where we are today.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of these suppliers are essentially subcontractors or contractors, and it's a competitive bid, and that means that you have to keep your price points competitive. So they're going to be using supplies that are affordable or cheaper. So naturally, when they have alternatives to choose from, they're going to choose the plastic or petro-based.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a somewhat of a rhetorical question, which is: are plastic utensils, plates, and cups really that big of an issue?
Yes, definitely from my perspective, they are. I think the way I like to think about it and speak about it is every piece of plastic you've ever used, that anyone on this planet has ever used, is still here today. So that sort of gives you a sense of the magnitude of the waste issue. And the bigger part of this too is I think there's been a huge myth that these products are actually recycled. Plastic, unfortunately, is not recycled. Only 5% of plastics globally are recycled. So all the takeout containers that you're using, all the various utensils in plastic, anything that you think is going to be recycled because you put it in a blue bin is actually not. And so all of that is going to landfill, either landfill or into our oceans, where it doesn't degrade. It breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces of plastic called microplastics, which are then digested by animals, which then go up the food chain. And when we, for example, eat the fish, we're eating the toxins that have been ingested through the microplastics by the fish are in our bodies. So it's pervasive, it's everywhere. It's a big problem.
So, like I mentioned before, in the past, there has been biodegradable and compostable cutlery, plates, cups that have been made of wood or plant-based. Some are even edible. They have a mixture of, let's say, flour-based, jowar, rice, and wheat.
Yes.
Why and how is your product better or different?
Well, I think what we're really great at doing at Repurpose is partnering with the latest and greatest technology companies that have sort of what we believe developed the best in class products that are the most sustainable, that have the highest quality, and that are commercialized so that they can be, affordable to everybody. And what we do is then, we're kind of in the process of vetting all of this so that we then partner with them and we're able to distribute this widely, to right now we're in the US primarily, and we're looking to go global, but to get this to in the hands of people at home. So we really focus again on using this at home and using this as a replacement for the plastics in your home. And there's really very few companies that are doing that. They're much more focused on, selling through to institutions and stadiums and corporate campuses, where we are really trying to say, if you want to remove the plastic in your home, we are the solution.
So let's get into a little bit of depth there, because again, a fork is going to have different functionality or characteristics than, let's say, a plate in terms of rigidity. So talk to us about the kinds of components like husk, for instance, or other things that's going in, and then the manufacturing process to help provide those functionalities and capabilities.
Absolutely. So I think what's really interesting is in terms of a plate, what people may not realize is what's different about a sustainable plate or repurposed plate is we are using an upcycled waste product. So what we use is the waste from the sugar industry. The sugar industry uses the juice from sugarcane, and then they typically burn the stalk or get rid of it. We actually use the stalk that is discarded, grind it up, and that is actually mixed with post-industrial wood chips, so the waste from wood processing. So it's all a waste product that is then turned into something useful. And because of that, we actually use 60% less energy to produce it in the first place. And it is compostable. So you can compost it. Plates and bowls can actually be composted in the backyard and in industrial compost. But that is what's so great about it, because it uses a waste product, it uses less energy to produce, and you can actually, it will degrade within 6 months. So there's no waste. So I think if people really sort of had that deeper understanding of what goes into it versus, a plastic plate or a foam plate or even a paper plate that may use virgin materials, it's just so much more sustainable from inception to where it ends up, end of life.
And we're seeing a lot more of these types of solutions where even in coffee, for instance, things that used to be thrown away are now starting to provide new products, and there's essentially monetization off that. So here we're talking about the byproducts of sugar canes as well as trees and so forth that normally would have just been waste. So it's reusing, but at the same time, there is quite a bit of science, right? There's experimentation, and of course the ratio and the process of making this is going to change over time as they improve and have the kind of functionality like I'm talking about, because again, not one size all fits. However, the other thing is that there is a growing need for biofuel. So you think about aviation fuel to even just energy used for industrial purposes. Bio is having a really kind of a big rebound these days. So the typical waste that would have gone to waste, landfills, let's say, is now starting to be harvested for the purpose of, let's say, fermentation, so they can make it into biofuels. Yes. How is that potentially going to compete with the sources that you guys are using? And is that an issue at all?
We don't consider it an issue at all, because of the percentage that we use is significantly smaller, and even at the rate that we're growing, and even at the rate of the global growth, because sugarcane is such a renewable resource, it's not like an old growth forest where if you cut something down, it doesn't grow again forever. This is something that is very, very renewable, and it allows us the opportunity to have a vast amount. And because it's a waste product, the sugar industry is so vast that for us, that's a non-issue. And in terms of, for example, we do use yellow dent corn. So this is a very starchy corn where the starches are actually used to mimic. It's a chemical process that allows the starch to kind of mimic the basic building blocks of plastics. So it's lactic acid. It turns into PLA, which is a building block for a lot of the sort of the clear looking non-plastic bioplastic. But again, it's just tiny percentage. It does not compete with ethanol or anything like that.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about business model and pricing. So a lot of this is really based on large scale. So it only makes sense from a marginal cost if you can actually have large runs. So talk about volume, and of course, one point of clarity is I don't believe you guys are the manufacturers, but rather the distributors or the marketing brand. Is that correct?
We are both, actually. Yes.
Tell us more.
Yeah. So what's really, really, I think, crucial here, as you said, is the volume piece. And so what's difficult is there are some really incredible new technologies that, for example, that use seaweed and or algae, or very, very interesting inputs. And, some of them are at scale and have commercialized. And we're not actually in the business of manufacturing seaweed, for example, but it's the price point is such that there isn't parity right now, or it's quite close to parity because it hasn't been commercialized. But I do believe once it starts to hit scale and there's more adoption of using these kinds of materials, the price will come down, much as it has in all the products that we use today that 10 years ago were 2x the price of conventional. Now you're close to parity. So I do believe what we need is much more mass adoption of this, and companies like us to take these new technologies and bring them to market so that we can commercialize some of these sort of much newer, more cutting edge, really, really interesting alternatives to plastic.
Now, in terms of defensibility, is that, again, while there is clearly IP in terms of formulary and process patents and so forth, the reality is the hurdle to entry is not significant. Maybe it's more capital intensive than not. What's going to preclude a larger player or an existing player to go into this space and to create a substantial brand?
I think it's something that's just, quite frankly, quite difficult to do, unless you are an existing player with a significant sort of brand equity in a similar category, to come in as an upstart and get with the distribution, be able to get the mind share, be able to kind of get to the place that some of the, where we are as Repurpose and maybe some other companies are. It takes time. It takes time to build a brand. And it's not that it can't be done. Of course it can, but what we've seen is there has there have been over the years a number of smaller upstarts using different technologies and slightly different formulations than what we use, but perhaps the price isn't right, the quality is not there, the consumer doesn't trust it, they don't have wide distribution, they don't understand how to work in retail. So it's tough to check all the boxes, I would say, to get the quality right, all the sustainability and the certifications right, to get the brand right, the message right. Certainly can be done, but it's not that easy.
So I'm going to change topic a little bit. When I think about what goes into my recycling bin, it's really not disposable cups, plates, or utensils, but rather packaging, boxes, plastic wraps,
Yep.
covers that's used to hold food or produce of some kind.
Yep.
And the issue is, especially the thin, clear plastic packaging that's used in produce and food, they're really not recyclable. What do we do about these other categories that tends to be maybe even a bigger pie and bigger problem than some of these disposable tableware?
Packaging is a huge issue. I think what's happening today is you're seeing, legislation on a state-by-state basis where they're actually banning the use of some of these plastic films and whatnot, and that's happening more and more. So you will see that the producers will have to change. Paper is recycled, so that's something that I think, and people recognize that as something more sustainable. But yes, these plastic films, they're just not. It's going right to landfill. It's going to the oceans. So we need this combination of a public-private partnership where the public sector will place bans or regulations on what can be produced, and then the producers, will produce the various alternatives. But yeah, it's difficult because in some cases with plastic films, there's just not that many viable alternatives because you need that performance. You need to be able to, keep something fresh or what have you. And currently there aren't a significant number of alternatives that could meet those kind of performance requirements. But I do see the change happening, albeit slowly, but with that kind of combination of regulation and kind of innovation from the producers, I think we'll get there.
So one of the things is when it comes to manufacturing, it's hard to stay away from, let's say, East Asia and Southeast Asia, China in particular. And then if you're looking for lower cost or manual labor, let's say Indonesia, Southeast Asia, for example. And certainly when it comes to access to some of the raw materials that you mentioned before, the issue with that, of course, is though we're not talking about very heavy materials, it still has to get transported. So it goes to the full supply chain and logistics. And there's fossil fuels used in that. What are your thoughts in terms of how do we move some of those manufacturing capabilities here domestically when we're competing with higher margin, higher value products like battery production, battery recycling, renewable energy, including the development and manufacturing of solar panels here in the US, as well as the wind turbine here in the US?
Well, I think what's been great with the Biden administration is this Inflation Reduction Act, which is providing funds for companies specifically like ours to take whatever we're doing overseas and bring that manufacture to the US. Without those subsidies, I think it would be very difficult. We have already onshored some of our manufacturing. So we produce some of it in the US already. We're looking to do more always. What you want to have too is the raw materials close to where you're producing the product. So that's a factor as well. One thing we do right now too is one of our partners in shipping, Flexport, we actually offset the carbon that's released in the shipping. So we're trying to take that out of the equation by doing a carbon offset for all of the shipping, which obviously is very important to us. So I think ideally, yes, you want to manufacture everything here, but there are definitely hurdles to doing it and doing it at a price that people will pay. So you need those subsidies. You need that public funding to be able to do it.
So we talked about scaling on the manufacturing side, but then on the distribution side and branding side, there needs to be also scaling as well.
Yes.
Recognizing this is still a fairly new nascent sector, how are you planning to really capture market share, have market leadership, versus those that's trying to, like you said, get into the stadiums and the bigger venues?
I think for us, and what we do well, and we have done well as we are the market leader currently, is to really, speak to consumers and speak to people that are not only interested in the category because they're sustainably minded, but speak to everyone. And obviously you can do that through a number of different channels, a number of different ways. It requires just telling the story across, as many platforms as you can. I think what's interesting for us is we're not a plastic company that's trying to get on a sustainability trend. We have been doing this for over 10 years. We are, led by women. We are an authentic brand. I've been in sustainability my whole life. So this is something that's, a personal passion that's turned into a company. And I think when people, know what's behind the product and know our story, they're more inclined to support us versus some sort of large, big plastic conglomerate. So for us, it's how can we tell the story in as many ways as possible? And it does require, a significant amount of time and effort and resources to tell it. But that's what we're very good at doing.
Well, I mean, practically speaking, is that I think more and more consumers are becoming much more sustainably conscious. However, it's also about access. So certainly we can order from the website, but for those that are looking to have a, let's say, Labor Day party, Memorial Day weekend party, or for something to that extent, they're just going to go pick it up from the big box stores. Yep. So how do you go about making sure that the distribution is done in such a way that people can easily access your products?
Yeah, well, we actually are in 15,000 retail doors today. We actually just launched in Costco, which is super exciting. We're in Targets, we're national in Rite Aid, we're national in Whole Foods, we're in Albertsons and Kroger and Wegmans and all the places that people shop, all the natural co-ops. So that's been a huge part of our strategy, to be where people shop, right? Like you said, if people are just having a party, they're not thinking about it a week ahead and ordering on Amazon. Maybe some organized people are, but a lot of people will just, put the stuff in the cart alongside, all the other things they need for their party. So yeah, for us, that's a huge piece. We have to be where people shop.
Well, I look forward to seeing Repurpose products at my next store run. I have been joined by Lauren Gropper, CEO of Repurpose. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Scott.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.